Look, China, what they're doing with fentanyl is a terrible thing. It comes through Canada and it comes through Mexico, but a lot of it's coming through Venezuela. Venezuela's been a very bad actor, and we understand that. And when you look at that boat, you see the bags of whatever it is there. Those bags were, you know what those bags represent? Hundreds of thousands of dead people in the United States.
Now, off to the US, where President Trump has called for action on any Venezuelan military airplanes that may be sent to fly over American naval vessels. Here he is speaking at a press conference at the Oval Office.
Would you like to see regime change in Venezuela?
Well, we're not talking about that, but we are talking about the fact that you had an election which was a very strange election, to put it mildly. I'm being very nice when I say that. I can only say that billions of dollars of drugs are pouring into our country from Venezuela. The prisons of Venezuela have been opened up to our country. They've taken their prisoners, the worst prisoners, murderers, Tren de Aragua. The worst prisoners that you can ever imagine are now happily living in the United States of America. Now, many of them we've gotten out. We took over, and ISIS was gone, and pretty amazing. But we never fought to win, and now we... Look, China, what they're doing with fentanyl is a terrible thing. It comes through Canada, and it comes through Mexico, but a lot of it's coming through Venezuela. Venezuela's been a very bad actor, and we understand that. And when you look at that boat, you see the bags of whatever it is there. Those bags were, you know what those bags represent? Hundreds of thousands of dead people in the United States. That's what they represent. Yeah, please.
Mr. President, your reaction to the job in Ukraine, sir?
Well, we'll work that out. We'll help them. Look, we want to save a lot of lives, so we'll do something with that. I think people expect.
On Venezuela, you've sent F-35s down to Puerto Rico. You've sent naval vessels into the Caribbean. You're concerned about drugs being illegally sent into the
Yeah.
How do you describe this buildup, this situation?
Well, I just think it's strong. We're strong on drugs. We don't want drugs killing our people. I believe we lost 300,000. You know, they always say 95, 100,000. I believe they've been saying that for 20 years. I believe we lost 300,000 people last year. I know families that lost their son. Those families will never be the same. I know a family lost a daughter, a beautiful daughter. In fact, it was like she took something that she thought was like a minor deal, and it turned out to be riddled out with fentanyl. The size of the head of a pin, and you're dead. And no, we're stopping the drugs. We're going to save a lot of people. Look, we had 11,000 murderers dropped into our country. We've gotten a lot of them out. And when I see boats coming in, like loaded up the other day with all sorts of drugs, probably fentanyl mostly, but all sorts of drugs, and we're going to take them out. And if people want to have fun going on the high seas or the low seas, they're going to be in trouble. I will tell you, boat traffic is substantially down in the area that happened. They called it the runway. It's a runway to the United States. And boat traffic is very substantially down on the runway. You can imagine why. I think anybody that saw that is going to say, I'll take a pass. I don't even know about fishermen. They may say, I'm not getting on the boat. I'm not going to take a chance.
What happens if Venezuela flies jets over U.S. naval vessels again?
Well, I would say they're going to be in trouble. We'll let them know about that. We heard that happen, but it wasn't really over, not like they described. But I would say, General, if they do that, you have a choice of doing anything you want, okay? If they fly in a dangerous position, I would say that you can, you or your captains can make the decision as to what they want to do, all right? Sure.
Well, this comes days after Venezuela is reported to have flown its military aircraft near a US vessel for the second time in as many days. Now, that follows a deadly strike on what the White House claimed was a drug-running boat from the South American nation. Plus, the US leader set his sights on the city of Chicago, threatening to send in the National Guard. And he's renamed the Department of Defense the Department of War. Well, let's get the very latest from the British-American journalist Sarah Baxter, director of the Marie Colvin Centre for International Reporting. Sarah, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, hello there, Alex.
Is Trump effectively declaring war on Venezuela?
He virtually is. I mean, he's almost taunting Venezuela to do something that would cause America to overreact. Or, it's like, go on, just tempt me, baby, and and then I'll let you, and then you'll be sorry. They've put Trump has put a price on the Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro's head, and it all seems to be beyond saber rattling and actually perhaps aiming at regime change. I was struck by the fact that Donald Trump reveres the Gilded Age of tariffs, etc. This was also an age where America, the late 19th century, where America was really asserting itself over Latin America and called it its backyard. And I think Trump is genuinely keen to have a fight with Venezuela. But of course, he's supposed to be the guy who despises war.
When it comes to the incident with the boat that was destroyed by the US Navy, has there been any proof that drugs were on board? Do we know who was on board?
No, there's been very little information about that. And a lot of people are very disturbed by the civil liberties implications of just taking out a boat. Now, I should say plenty of Americans think, great, because it's a terrific deterrence, isn't it? If you just sort of assassinate people on a boat and who may or may not be drug smugglers. Perhaps drug smugglers are going to think twice about coming into America's shore. So reaction is mixed. But there was quite a lot of concern, and emerging concern actually, because this happened quite late yesterday, about a tweet or an ex-post by J.D. Vance in which she said, I don't give an SH1T, to put it politely.
Thank you.
If people think that what was done was a war crime, because you're not supposed to just use America's might to eliminate alleged foes without any due process. And Rand Paul, who is a rather independent-minded Republican, but has been pretty Trumpian in a lot of his views, has absolutely lashed out at J.D. Vance for saying this is completely un-American values, and that you have to have the rule of law. You can't just say, oh, America can go about committing these kind of war crimes with impunity. And I think that's a shot at J.D. Vance, because Rand Paul will almost certainly want to challenge him for the presidency in 2028. And there are splits in MAGA developing over all kinds of things. I mean, partly under pressure from the economy. But Trump is not getting the pass that he did from people. I think he's being seen as slightly more lame duck and more vulnerable. And certainly people don't want J.D. Vance to succeed him, or at least people who think they ought to be president themselves. So this is becoming a little crucible. This Venezuela strike and the strike on the boats and cartels, and moreover, the thing you alluded to earlier about sending troops into Chicago.
Well, let's talk about that, because of course that happened in Washington, D.C., even though crime rates had been falling. Admittedly, there were some areas that were still having quite a high rate, but in general, Washington, D.C. was becoming safer. But that didn't stop Donald Trump to bringing in the National Guard. Now, it's easier said than done in D.C. because of its lack of governor. But when it comes to Chicago, can Donald Trump send in the National Guard without the governor approving it?
Well, there are ways. I mean, legally, of course, all these things are open to challenge. He did it in California and did get legally challenged, and that's currently pending. But J.B. Pritzker, by the way, another future hopeful presidential nominee for the Democrats, who's the governor of Illinois, has said it's sort of pretty much over his dead body. I'm exaggerating there. He didn't use those words, but you get my drift. And there have been rumors flying around that Trump was going to send in the Texas National Guard. Now, if he does that, that would be massively inflammatory, because it would be using one state against the other. So I think that probably, if it was ever mooted, that probably is now not going to happen, because the opposition is so great to it. But again, a bit like Rand Paul, now Trumpian podcaster called Megyn Kelly, very influential, has been saying that to send in the National Guard in Chicago in this way, or send troops into Chicago in this way, would be absolutely unconstitutional, to send in the military like that. And so splits are emerging in this MAGA coalition that was so effective during the election, and we may well see a showdown. And again, a bit like J.D. Vance's tweet, Donald Trump put out a post also on his own social media, Truth Social, but of course, it turned up on X and everywhere else, threatening a sort of I can't even pronounce it. Chickopocalypse, right? That's the using
Chicago apocalypse.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, sorry, I was sort of stumbling there. But with that being, with him looking like the Mad Dog Colonel in
it's the Robert Duvall
Apocalypse
character in Apocalypse Now. I love the smell of napalm in the morning. That scene for people who've seen it. That's the sort of the background, but it's Trump's face on that general. Under what pretense would he be sending in the National Guard? Is there exceedingly high crime in Chicago?
There has always been exceedingly high crime in Chicago. It's one of the crime hotspots. But a lot of the red states, Republican states, have higher crime rates than Chicago or Washington, D.C., for that matter. And things have been getting better. So if anything, the crime rate's gone down. I think there was a huge spike, actually, in cities, around the sort of after COVID, etc. It's now come down. Mm-hmm. So you can play the figures either way. These are not particularly safe cities, I'll be honest with you, but nor is it the apocalypse now hellscape that Donald Trump is projecting. And he is using the maximum of his powers in very untested ways. And that alarms people because, of course, Democrats warned that democracy might be a threat under Trump. And if people get used to a militarized police force, National Guard, and actual troops on the streets of the city who can be ordered at whim by the president to do what they like, what does that mean?
Sarah, I just want to get, just very briefly, we're running out of time, but your thoughts, something that has been said to not have gone down very well, perhaps surprisingly with Donald Trump's followers, is this renaming of the Department of Defense to the Department of War. It's caused friction amongst his own supporters because, of course, they got into government by Doge was very much the driving force. Government efficiency. We're not going to be wasting money. We're going to be cutting all those woke issues and the amount of money that it costs the American taxpayer. But this renaming of the Department of Defense to the Department of War is going to cost quite a lot of money. And Trump's own supporters are saying, well, hang on, this is a complete waste of money, isn't it?
Well, of course, it's a complete waste of money. And also, just how sabre-rattling is it? I mean, I know that the Department of Defense can sometimes seem a little Orwellian when America is at war. But to rename it, which, like, say, when it was invading Iraq or something, but to rename the Department of War, the whole rebrand is, of course, a total waste of money. But it's beyond that because it's also why does he want it to sound so martial? Obviously, Trump loves martial sounding things he thinks that makes the president look good. But he's supposed to be the person who's against forever wars and entanglements that you don't know where they're going to end. And that applies in Venezuela. It applies domestically in places like Chicago. Where is all this going? What is he doing with the US military? And why does he feel the need to make it so martial sounding? And people will soon start to wonder whether it's overcompensation for the fact that the economy is not doing so well under Trump, despite his promises there.
Sarah, thank you. Always good to talk. Sarah Baxter there, Director of the Marie Colvin Centre for International Reporting.